The stereotype says that fathers walk away from their children, but what about the fathers that want to stay in their children's lives, but the systems keep pushing them to the margins? Fathers are often seen as essential when it comes to providing money, but only optional when it comes to providing a stable presence in their child's life. This episode is about the fathers that want to be present in their child's life, who want to keep supporting them, but are continually separated from them by the systems and the family courts. So, with that being said, I just want to first of all acknowledge that a huge number of men, I'm talking many hundreds, have left comments in regard to the pain that they feel by having their children effectively removed from their lives in significant part or entirely through things like the family courts, family violence orders, and other mechanisms of control in the legal system and family area of law. I've read your messages, I hear you, and I want to let you know that your feelings are valid and that your feelings and experiences are not uncommon, unfortunately, whether that be here in Australia or New Zealand or the UK or Canada or the United States of America. Fathers in all of these countries, these Western countries, are experiencing the same thing, whereby they are effectively pushed out of their children's lives, even when they want to be part of their children's lives and continue to support them regardless. So I want to talk about this today, and I think I want to open up with the fact that is that the idea that most absent fathers don't want to be in their children's lives, when in fact it seems that the absent fathers do actually want to be in their children's lives, but through no fault of their own are separated by them, or from them, I should say. So it's interesting. So I want to start with, this is a really important stat. So the Household Income and Labour Dynamics survey in Australia found that 75% of non-resident fathers stated that they felt they had inadequate time with their children and that they wanted absolutely more time with their children. 75% of non-resident fathers stated that they wanted more time with their children. Okay? Now, that number is echoed in all those countries I mentioned. And in fact, in other parts of the world, it's as high as about 85% as opposed to 75%. So I think that's a really important thing to understand, that really the idea of no contact, this not seeing your children rhetoric that we hear often about fathers, the absent father myth, if you will, or at least a misnomer in this case, is not due to a man not wanting to see his child. In fact, it's more than likely, in fact proven to be, the case that it's due to conflict with the mother of the child, and the mother often seeking to make that man's life a misery and to destroy the connection that he has with his child as a form of emotional and psychological abuse and coercive control. It's just funny that because it's occurring often in a family court situation, that it's not seen that way. It is obviously the case that only about 3% of separations and divorces between a man and a woman involving children generally end up in family court. But that is still a large number, or large enough to warrant talking about, because it's people's lives, and it's fathers, and it's mothers, and it's, most importantly, children. So at the end of the day, it's important to remember this statistic when you hear any talk about the absent father, and that these fathers aren't wanting to be in their child's lives, and that explains why single mother rates are so high. It's not because the man's abandoning it. It's because over 3/4 of non-resident fathers do absolutely want to be in their children's lives. So I think that brings me to another important point around the fathers being restricted access to their children before proof or evidence is provided that effectively states that they are not appropriate to be around the children. And what do I mean by that? Well, effectively, false allegations are made by the mother of a child, say in family court. It's only a civil standard there, and it's based on probable, I think you call it probable cause, or on the basis of probabilities, I should say. So the burden of proof isn't as strong or high as it would be in a criminal case. If you made an allegation, for example, that a person had sexually assaulted a child and you went to the police station, that would be a criminal matter. Whereas if you make that claim in the family court, it's not handled with the same level of veracity. Now, does it mean the family courts ignore evidence? No, of course not. They're trying to act in the best way possible that is advantageous to the child's well-being. It just seems unfortunate that that well-being doesn't involve the father, and that the family courts disproportionately give minimum or no access and custody to the father in these cases due to no fault of their own. Now, what is, I think, most concerning is that if an allegation is made by the mother that, say, a father has physically abused his child, well, the court has a duty of responsibility to investigate that and, in the meantime, effectively keep that child away from that father until such time that it is proven or disproven that the father indeed has engaged in that behavior. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that the father is still not going to see his child when that allegation is made, regardless of whether it's true. The father is going to have to defend himself. He's likely going to have to lawyer up and pay more money for lawyers to defend himself. And likely in a case like that, it's very hard to prove yourself innocent, because how do you prove yourself innocent of something that's been said? Now, the problem with that is, whilst the court is acting in the child's best interest there, and I think we can all agree if it's better to err on the side of caution, it still means that the father, in the time that the mother in this case is ordered to prove her statement and provide the evidence, that could take many, many months. And in those many, many months, you got interim parenting orders, imposed supervised contact, these kinds of things that effectively sharply reduce the amount of time that a father can spend with his child, and in such serious cases as, say, child physical or sexual abuse, completely remove it for many months, if not years, if things are really bad, based purely on disputed allegations that have been unresolved. So effectively, the courts are taking a protective caution for the child, and really they are protecting the mother as well, and that the father is effectively stuck in limbo where he doesn't get to see his child, and now he has to defend himself against these allegations. So really the problem is that the system does not need to permanently remove a father from the child's life. All it needs to do is interfere enough at an early enough stage that the father's time is reduced to such a small amount that those developmental years of that child are impacted, and the bond between that father is effectively damaged or completely destroyed. The father will miss out life-changing events, particularly in the early developmental years of a child. They'll miss out important birthday milestones and other beautiful memories, maybe their child's first step, their first words. they may miss all of that while these allegations are being resolved. And even if the allegation is proven false and no evidence is there, he can never get that time back. And that is heartbreaking. And I hear a lot of men talking about these situations where they're stuck like this, or where a family violence order, whatever country you're in, it might be called a domestic violence order, or whatever you might use in your country. In that time that it's put through, it still affects his time. And I keep hearing this, and it's terrible. Now, like I said at the opening, despite all that, the father still has to pay the money for child support. And I know, for example, you would have other payments such as maintenance payments that go to the mother of the child, or I guess it would be called alimony in America, that got to go through to the family. And like I said, the father is considered essential for his money, but then is considered optional as a stable parent, male figure in a child's life. And I think that is heartbreaking. In fact, so the Australian Institute of Family Studies data, okay, shows that 57% of child support program payees had arrangements where mothers were provided with 87 to 100% of nights with their children, which left fathers with less than 51 days a year with their children. That is awful. That is terrible. That is something we need to talk about. And it has very little to do with the father being a monster or having hurt his children. In fact, he could be a great father, and he could be supporting that child financially and supporting the mother of his child entirely, yet the court will not rule in his favour, because we have this stereotype that the woman is the primary caregiver, and that is effectively the case from 1 to 18 years of age. Is it particularly important for the early stages? Let's say infancy, 1 year through to maybe 6. Well, I think it's hard to argue against that. But that doesn't mean you remove the father, because the father is still very important in that regard. Children need that father figure, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But there's no arguing that fathers shouldn't support their children financially just because the family courts or the wicked mother of their children has made their life a misery and made it such that they can't see their children. I think that a lot of fathers say, well, if I can't even see my child, at least in my heart, I know that I can be providing financial support to them, and just hope that they get all that money, and that the mother of that child doesn't scrap a huge amount of that off the top and use it for herself, which, let's face it, likely happens. Now, what does this mean? Well, this means that nearly 3 in 5 arrangements left fathers with no more than 51 nights a year, while equal parenting occurred in fewer than 1 in 10 organised court orders. Now, that is horrible, okay? Nearly 3 in 5 arrangements left the fathers with no more than about 51 nights a year with their children, and only 1 in 10 fathers got anywhere near equal parenting time with their children. If that is not a form of blatant institutional or systematic sexism and discrimination against fathers, then I don't know what is. Contrary to what is often said, is this the fathers are in these situations because they've done the wrong thing. As I keep saying, no, a lot of them aren't. In fact, most of them aren't. It's just the system makes it that way. And what does that mean? Well, it inflates the number that comes across in single mother rates. What does that do? It makes men look like they've bounced and done nothing. But those single mother rates, ironically, are likely perpetuated, if not entirely caused, by the very legal systems that push the father out of the child's life. So that is the end outcome. We need to talk about this. This shouldn't be something we keep sweeping under the rug. Another thing I want to say, And this is really sad. This is something really sad that I learned. So like I said, the early exclusion of a father in their child's life can end up becoming long-term or permanent exclusion from that child's life forever. Now, how do we know that? Well, we know through some studies out of the UK. So what we understand is that a father pushed out during those early years of the child's life may be completely gone before that child even reaches secondary schooling ages. And the United Kingdom Millennium Cohort Study followed nearly 3,000 children and found that more than 1 in 4 fathers who separated before age 3 had no contact with their children by age 11. That's the end of that father and child bond. And there's very little to repair that. And you hear too often children resenting their fathers because of situations like this, only to find out when they're in their 30s or 40s and their father's on the deathbed, son, I supported you financially, I did all these things, this is what happened, I always loved you and wanted to be in your life, but I couldn't. The systems forced us apart, and then I felt that the bond was so broken that perhaps I was better off not in your life. And that is just a heartbreaking thing to hear. But unfortunately, it's the case. So what does that sort of mean? Well, it just means that early marginalisation of the fathers from their children ends up having long-term second and subsequent order effects on that relationship and on that child's well-being right into adolescence and, let's face it, adulthood as well. So if we summarize that, we can say that, again, more than 1/4 of fathers separated from their children's life before the age of 3 had no further contact with their child by age 11. And that's because of the family courts, the criminal justice system, the feminist and gynocentric narratives that continue to prioritize the mother over the father. Now, why is that wrong? Well, like I said, it increases single mother rates, and it means that children are raised without a father. Now, what does being raised without a father do to the child? Well, this is something else we know. So, when a child loses a relationship with their father, they lose a protective relationship with a parent in particular. Doesn't mean mothers aren't fiercely protective of the kids. Of course they are. But there's an element as children get older that they need that father figure to teach and give them wisdom so as to also protect themselves. So, effectively, when the father is pushed out of the child's life, they're losing more than just financial support, okay? They are losing a relationship that is well and truly more about protection than simply money and financial needs, okay? Now, this is an area that's been well contested, particularly in criminology around criminal juvenile delinquency, but there are longitudinal studies to indicate that children do have significantly better long-term life outcomes when they have a father present. Indeed, the nuclear family, the mother and the father and the child, is ultimately the best family unit, and I'll talk about this more in other videos. But what we can tell from when we disaggregate the data is that the life outcomes of children raised by single fathers are actually higher than the life outcomes of children raised by single mothers. Yet, as I've just said, the family courts and the criminal justice system and society more broadly forces men away from their children, right, at an early age, and says that women are the best sole carers indefinitely. And that is actually not the case at all. Young boys absolutely need male role models, so they don't resort to things like gang crime and seeking out those masculine role models in people that are dangerous men. And women need masculine role models in the form of a stable, loving father, so that they know what kind of man they should be getting into a relationship with. All right? A man that maybe mirrors those positive, loving values. So it's interesting to see that the quality of the father-child relationship predicts the well-being of that child far more than just the financial support. Yet everything's put on the financial support. That's just an unfortunate stereotype about men, and generally with women and children. If you can see the relationship between what's expected of men in relationships with women and children, without trying to be condescending to women, there's a significant parallel there that I think needs to be discussed. But really what we can see is that a child support payment can help, right, sustaining a child, but it's not going to help the father be there for their child's music performance at school or their first soccer game or whatever it might be. It's not going to help with that. And unfortunately, in places like America in particular, we have alimony and child support. Even in paternity for all cases where you prove the child isn't yours, if you've signed the birth certificate and legal documents, it's incredibly difficult to overturn the fact that you are now that legal father of that child. In most cases, that just doesn't happen. And so fathers are paying the child support for a child that isn't there for 18 years, and then also paying alimony for often at least as long to a woman who has lied to them and betrayed them. Now, men should be paying their maintenance and paying child support, particularly if that woman is a good woman, but the child needs to be given the money. I just want to say to men that unfortunately, your protective relationship is stripped from your child, but you're still expected to pay money, and I'm sure that you still love your child and you do want to do that if that's all you can do. But it is very upsetting and very sad that is what you are reduced to, which is effectively an ATM as opposed to a strong, loving male role model in your child's life as their father. I can talk about that quite a bit more in another video, I think, around the financial side of it. This is not an argument against not paying for your child unless you see them. It's not something that should be traded around like that. It's a child's life. And the sad thing is for you gentlemen is that this is unfortunately a way the system is set up at a legal level. And I would urge you, the best thing that you can do as a father who may be looking down the barrel of a divorce and potentially issues around court and having your children taken from you, is that right now, before it gets to that level, you must build up a strong record of spending at least equal time or more than equal time with your children than the mother of your child. If you go to family court off the back of barely spending much time with your children, then you ask for more than that or equal to that, they are going to look at what the past parenting arrangement has been, and they're going to say, well, you barely saw your child anyway, so you don't need to now. In fact, we're not even going to give you any access to your child. So my biggest bit of advice to fathers out there is put in the time now with your child. Spend the time with your child now, because if that is all ripped away from you because of a legal battle in a family court with a horrible mother to your children, right, or during a divorce, then they will look at your history. And if that history shows that you have been an absent father, then unfortunately, it's likely going to be the case that they don't give you any custody of that child when it goes to court. As I said, it's like 1 in 10 chance that you would get even predominant custody. The problem there, and I've just realised that thinking it out, is if you are the sole breadwinner, as men have traditionally been, you're likely not able to spend much time around your kids in any other capacity other than providing financially to put a roof over their head and food in their little tummies, right? So the court will look at that likely, and it will be said that, oh, well, you were just working, never spent time with your kids. So it's this tragic, sad irony where you're doing the best you can as a father to put food on the table for your child and keep them safe, yet you yourself can't actually spend time with that child. And that is the cost that men have paid for generations, is to trade their time to go to work to make money to feed their child, only to not be able to spend time with their child, or indeed their wife if they've got a loving wife. That is the opportunity cost of working in order to give your child the life that you want them to have and that they deserve. Okay, so there's a bit here to unpack, and I will go into it more, but I just want to say that my heart goes out to all of my male supporters and just men in general who are struggling in family courts, who are struggling for custody of their children and who are just being treated terribly. Your experiences are real and they shouldn't be invalidated, and the data is there to back up the fact that the vast majority of you, 75 to 85% of you, do want more time with your children and you do love them dearly. Okay, so once again, just to finish up, the question is not whether fathers should be paying child support. They should. The question is whether society as a whole and the legal systems within it should, with the same level of determination as they pursue men for money for their children, should have that same level of determination in keeping that father in the child's life. In my opinion, they should. Is it likely to happen? No, not until the laws are changed, whether it be in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, or the United States, or any other Western country. Till those laws are changed, unfortunately, this is going to be the cross that men have to bear for their children. Okay? Anyway, we'll talk about this more soon. Thank you so much for your support. If you've liked this video, please obviously leave a comment, subscribe, like, and share with other men that need to hear it. But yeah, I think that's it for now. And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.